It's story time. Chapter 3: Creepy Creatures. Today, Em is an incredibly knowledgeable animal expert, and her career journey is just as fascinating as the animals she works with.
My fascination for the natural world has been a part of me ever since I was a child, and I would go out into the wild and come home with my pockets full of worms and grasshoppers and snails, and my mum, gosh, she hated it because she is terrified of all creatures. To her, like, animals belong outside, humans belong inside, and that was definitely something very difficult for her to come to terms with. Of course, she understands it now, but back then it was very difficult for her. And when I moved to Hong Kong at the age of 10, I wrote to my local pet store and just said, hey, I really would love to get some work experience. Do you need someone to come in and give you a hand? Like, I will work for free, or I will work for birdseed, because I had some budgies at home that needed birdseed, and they hired me for a tiny wage, like maybe the equivalent of $2 a day, and birdseed. And I would go straight after school and stack the shelves, and before long I was excelling so much in being a pet store worker, they actually promoted me to manager at the age of 10, and the woman who I worked for would just go away and leave me in charge of the store, and I loved it. And when they shut down, I started working for the Hong Kong RSPCA, which is now just the SPCA, but it is the dog shelter in Hong Kong, one of the biggest. And my job was to go out and trap various feral dogs, and then to bring them in, arrange for them to be spayed or neutered, and then I would work with them at the age of 11 through to 14, and then place them in a home and match them with the right family. So it was a lot of responsibility for someone who is young, but as I've said earlier, it's almost like if I happen to have either a gift or a predisposition for what I do, it's been with me since the very beginning, and it never felt like work to me. It's just second nature. Following on from that, I became super immersed in exotics because I developed a huge fur allergy and I could no longer really work with dogs or cats, and that really broke my heart. So for about the next 10 years or so, I worked with reptiles, with, different kinds of lizards and snakes, and I found a huge appreciation for them. And I would travel all over the world learning about different venomous species and learning how to trap different kinds of venomous species of snakes from people's homes, removing them safely, educating local communities about what kinds of snakes were venomous and which were benign, and how to safely remove them from your house. And I really loved that. I really do. I love working with people as much as animals. There are certainly two different kinds of animal people. You've got animal people who are just animal people and don't like people, and then you've got animal people who really love people as well, and I'm definitely the latter. I am such a chatterbox. I love to talk about animals at length to anyone who will listen. So my next jump was to YouTube, because then I could just talk at length about all kinds of animals, and I didn't think that my YouTube channel would ever be what it is today. I was happy when I had 12 views on a video, and all of a sudden people were flocking in from all over the world and leaving comments and subscribing and telling me how much they appreciated learning about cockroaches and snails and Argentinian tegus and all of these creepy creatures that most people would not want to hold. And let me tell you, I love the creepier creatures.
I couldn't have Em on the show and not have her drop some creepy creature knowledge for us.
I will tell you my two favorite creepy creatures. One of them is called the lancet liver fluke, and it's a kind of parasitic flatworm. It's tiny and it's capable of mind control. The liver fluke starts off life as an egg. It lives in the dung of hoofstock like sheep and cows, so the eggs are literally in the feces. And then snails will come up onto the dung, ingest the liver fluke eggs, and the snails become these parasites' first hosts. The eggs lodge themselves inside the guts of the snail where they start to develop, and then when they're about ready to hatch, the snail expels the eggs, and then they attract and are eaten by ants. Now this is where the fun really starts, because once these liver flukes are inside the ants, the worms hatch out of their eggs, and one of the worms will slip its way up into the brain of the ant, where it then takes over the ant's ability to actually think and behave. And the worm makes the ant climb up to the grass stalks and into harm's way, because ants don't want to be at the top of grass stalks, that they're more likely to get eaten if they're out in the open like that, which is why they tend to be on the floor. And then in the morning, they tend to get eaten by cattle or sheep, because obviously these are grazing creatures which are eating up the blades of grass. And then once they're inside the cattle and the sheep, the ant of course is now dead, and then the liver flukes start to reproduce, and the cycle continues.
After Em shared this, it reminded me of a documentary I watched recently. Scientists had poured cement into an anthill so that they could study the pathways of an ant colony. And I remember thinking, can you imagine being an ant going about your day, and all of a sudden you're drowning in cement and your entire world is frozen in time? And it made me think about natural disasters, and I thought, what if that is our equivalent of someone pouring cement into our world to study us? We don't often think of ourselves as microscopic, but there are about an estimated 2 trillion galaxies in our observable universe. And that thought scares a lot of people, but I actually find it comforting. The liver fluke relies on multiple creatures to fulfill its destiny, and whether we're the liver fluke, the snail, the ant, or the sheep in the equation, we're an important part of the equation, working together.
I question our world as humans every single day. There is so much that we don't yet completely understand, just to do with our psychology, all the way to the way that we interact with other creatures and other beings, that just makes me think that we know nothing. There's plenty that we have left to learn. I mean, one of the most incredible things I think in the animal kingdom is parasites, and it's because there are parasites everywhere we go. We've heard of energy vampires, and then there's all kinds of different plagues out there. I mean, hey, we're living through COVID-19 right now, but one of the most interesting parasites I think that I've learned about in recent years is to do with the crazy cat lady. And if anyone has ever met someone who is really into cats, here's a word for you to learn: Toxoplasmosis. Now, with cats, they have a very special parasite that they can spread very easily. Many cats have it, and it is the Toxoplasmosis parasite, also known as T. gondii. And when this parasite finds a host in a rodent, it chemically alters the rodent, and rodents will run towards cats to their death because they are attracted to the smell of the cat and the cat's urine. And it's the same with people. Some people, if they end up with toxoplasmosis, they become the quintessential crazy cat lady, or cat man for that matter. But yes, it can chemically alter you to the point where your whole life becomes about cats. So certainly there's a lot that we have to think about, and I don't think that we've even begun to understand the natural world half as well as we think we already know it. Not only is the natural world freaky, but when nature gets freaky, it can be really freaky, and that is so fascinating to me. And for anyone who doesn't catch my drift, we're talking about freaky mating rituals, and one that I want to introduce you to is the crazy and creepy world of anglerfish. Now, if you don't know what an anglerfish looks like, and you've seen that classic movie Finding Nemo, it is that big, fat, ghoulish fish that lives in the dark depths of the ocean, and they have these huge jaws and this massive lure on top of their heads, which they dangle in front of their faces, and it has a bioluminescent lure on the end, which draws in fish. It's literally like a little flashing light. But aside from their freaky looks, the way that they get jiggy with one another is horrific. Like, guys out there, be thankful you are not an anglerfish. So what happens is when the female anglerfish is ready to breed, she will use that bioluminescent lure to attract a male. And when the male, who is far smaller than the huge female anglerfish, he will find her, he will bite onto her belly area and just hold on. Eventually, they start to fuse together. The female literally absorbs the male to the point that his fins and even his eyes can atrophy and straight up fall off. And then, once he has been almost fully absorbed, the male and the female begin to share her blood supply. So the male stays stuck to the female forevermore, providing her with sperm whenever she's ready to mate, but essentially living as a little eyeless face on her stomach for all eternity. I mean, if that's not true love, I don't know what is. I think there is so much that we can stand to learn from marine life, and it's true, we have only really explored about 5% of the ocean, so it's almost like exploring space, but it's right here with us, and there are some incredible species in the sea. One of my favorites is the orca, or the killer whale, which is neither a killer nor a whale, really. The females tend to be the ringleaders. It's a matriarchal society, and what we've learned from studying the orca's brain is that their frontal lobe, which is where you process emotion, is so far developed that us humans cannot even begin to comprehend the level of complex emotions that orcas feel. They feel things that we don't understand. So that's what leads me to believe that animals do have souls, that they do feel things and experience things in a way that we'll never understand, because everything is created so differently. And the fact that a sea creature, which is just one of the most powerful kinetic animals out there and lives in a matriarchal society and can communicate, has language, has dialect, we cannot begin to understand how they feel. So certainly that gives me some kind of moral dilemmas when it comes to animals in captivity. Like, can we truly ever really understand them? Now, to be fair, I am pro-captivity when an animal is born in captivity and is given wonderful enrichment and everything that it needs, because without getting too political, there is not much of a wild to release many animals to. So it's good to preserve species until a point that perhaps maybe we don't need to have them in captivity again. But certainly whilst keeping them in captivity, we really should be looking at what we can do to give them the optimal lives, not just so that they are surviving in captivity, but thriving as well, and really taking this opportunity to really think about what does it mean to be a living, breathing organism, because it's different from person to person, as it is dog to dog, as it is species to species. So, I mean, it blows my mind. Oh my goodness, the natural world is just a smorgasbord of discovery waiting to happen. I feel that in studying animals and various kinds of anomalies that can happen within animals, whether they are genetic or behavioral, it makes me more interested in people as well. One of the greatest things I've learned from working with animals, observing animals, and also just humans, because we ourselves are animals as well, is that nothing is ever certain. We are never guaranteed health the next day. There are always anomalies, there are always changes in our code. There's always something different, and there's so much that's outside of our control. So I want to inspire people to live life to the fullest and to remember that life is to be enjoyed, not endured. So take a couple of chances. Don't be afraid to take a risk every now and then. So certainly, if there's something you want to do, get out there and make it happen.